This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.
Fanny Price, a mere 10 years old, stood trembling at the gates of Mansfield Park. The daughter of an impoverished naval officer, she had come to live with her wealthy relatives, the Bertrams, in a world entirely foreign to her own. The grand estate loomed before her like a mountain, its manicured lawns stretching endlessly, and its towering columns reaching for the sky. Fanny's small hands clutched her worn suitcase, her knuckles white with fear and anticipation. The crunch of gravel beneath her feet echoed in her ears, each step carrying her further from the familiar chaos of Portsmouth's cramped streets. As the massive oak doors creaked open, a gust of air heavy with beeswax and expensive perfumes washed over Fanny. She blinked, momentarily dazzled by the sparkling chandeliers and polished marble floors. A sea of unfamiliar faces swam before her eyes, their expressions a mix of curiosity, indifference, and barely concealed disdain. Sir Thomas Bertram, a man as imposing as the house itself, nodded curtly. His wife, Lady Bertram, offered a vague smile from her perch on an ornate chaise, her silk gown rustling softly. Their children, Tom, Maria, and Julia, stared at Fanny as if she were an oddity on display, their refined accents a stark contrast to her own rough-edged speech. Mrs. Norris, Lady Bertram's sister, bustled about importantly, her shrill voice cutting through the air like a knife. "The child must learn her place," she declared, her gaze cold when it fell upon Fanny. "She's here out of charity, after all." Fanny's heart sank, a lump forming in her throat. She felt like a sparrow among peacocks, small and drab and utterly out of place. The very air seemed to reject her, closing in around her like an invisible cage. As the day wore on, Fanny's sense of displacement only grew. The family chattered about balls and hunts and society gossip, their words washing over her in an incomprehensible tide. She longed for the salty tang of the sea, for her mother's warm embrace, for the comforting cacophony of her siblings' laughter. It was in this moment of overwhelming loneliness that Edmund, the second Bertram son, noticed Fanny's distress. Unlike his siblings, whose interest had quickly waned, Edmund approached her with genuine kindness. His voice was as gentle as a summer breeze when he asked about her journey. "It must be quite a change for you," Edmund said softly, offering Fanny a handkerchief to dry her tears. "But I promise, in time, you'll find your place here." His words were like a lifeline thrown to a drowning sailor. As Edmund patiently explained the routines of Mansfield Park and answered her hesitant questions, Fanny felt the first tendrils of hope take root in her heart. Over the following days, Edmund became Fanny's guide and protector. He showed her the library, a treasure trove of leather-bound volumes that smelled of dust and adventure. In the garden, he taught her the names of flowers she had never seen before, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the gray streets of Portsmouth. When homesickness threatened to overwhelm her, Edmund was there with a kind word or a distracting story. Their friendship blossomed like a delicate flower pushing through cracks and stone, fragile yet determined. In Edmund, Fanny found not just a cousin, but a confidant and ally. His compassion was a balm to the ache of separation from her family, and his patient explanations helped her navigate the unfamiliar social waters of her new home. As the weeks passed, Fanny began to find her footing in the grand halls of Mansfield Park. The initial shock of her surroundings faded, replaced by a growing appreciation for the beauty and opportunities her new life afforded. Yet even as she adapted, Fanny never forgot the kindness that had seen her through those first difficult days. Edmund's friendship had formed the foundation of her new life, a cornerstone upon which Fanny could build her future at Mansfield Park. As she watched him across the drawing room one evening, engaged in lively conversation with his sisters, Fanny felt a warmth in her chest. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with Edmund by her side, his unwavering support a constant in her ever-changing world. But as the candles burned low and the evening drew to a close, Fanny couldn't shake a nagging feeling of unease. She caught Mrs. Norris watching her with narrowed eyes, and even Edmund's siblings seemed to look through her rather than at her. As she climbed the stairs to her small attic room, Fanny wondered if she would ever truly belong in this glittering world of wealth and privilege. Little did she know that the coming years would test her resilience in ways she could never have imagined, and that her place in the Bertram household was far from secure. As the years passed, Fanny Price grew into a shy and often overlooked young woman. She found herself frequently treated as a second-class member of the household, her presence barely acknowledged by most of the Bertram family. The grand halls of Mansfield Park echoed with the laughter and chatter of the Bertram sisters, their voices bouncing off the polished marble floors and ornate wallpaper. In stark contrast, Fanny moved like a shadow, her footsteps light as a feather, her voice rarely rising above a whisper. The air around her seemed heavy with unspoken words and stifled emotions. Mrs. Norris, Fanny's aunt, took particular delight in reminding the young woman of her lowly status. Her shrill voice cut through the air like a knife, dripping with false sweetness. "Fanny, dear," she would say, her eyes narrowing, "do be a good girl and fetch my sewing basket. It's the least you can do to repay the kindness shown to you." With each passing day, Fanny found herself assigned more menial tasks. The weight of Mrs. Norris's critical gaze followed her every move, pressing down on her shoulders like an invisible burden. "No, no, not like that," Mrs. Norris would chide, her lips pursed in disapproval. The constant criticism stung like tiny pinpricks, leaving invisible wounds on Fanny's tender heart. In stark contrast to Mrs. Norris's constant criticism, Lady Bertram floated through life in a haze of indolence. She reclined on her chaise lounge, a pampered lapdog curled at her feet, while Fanny scurried about, attending to her every whim. The soft rustle of Lady Bertram's silk gown and the gentle snoring of her pet were the only sounds that broke the stifling silence. "Fanny, do read to me," Lady Bertram would murmur, her eyes half closed, voice thick with lethargy. "And do fetch me another cushion. This one's not quite right." The constant demands, though softly spoken, wore on Fanny like water on stone, slowly eroding her sense of self-worth. Despite the challenges that seemed to pile up like autumn leaves, Fanny's spirit remained unbroken. Her kindness shone like a beacon in the often cold and indifferent household. She tended to the needs of others with a grace that belied her years, her gentle nature a balm to those who took the time to notice. As the days turned into weeks and months, Sir Thomas Bertram began to see beyond Fanny's quiet exterior. He observed her diligence, her unwavering moral compass, and the way she carried herself with dignity despite the often unkind treatment she received. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, his respect for her grew, like a tender shoot pushing through hard soil. But it was Edmund, dear Edmund, who held Fanny's heart in his unknowing hands. Her love for him bloomed like a delicate flower in the shade, unseen and unacknowledged. She treasured every moment in his company, every shared laugh, every confidential conversation. The sound of his voice made her heart flutter like a caged bird, while his obliviousness to her feelings was a constant, dull ache in her chest. As Maria and Julia blossomed into society beauties, their days filled with parties and admirers, Fanny remained in the background. She was like a wallflower at a grand ball, her quiet virtues overshadowed by the dazzling display of her cousins. The rustle of their fine gowns and the tinkling of their laughter seemed to push Fanny further into the shadows. Yet in her solitude, Fanny found strength. She immersed herself in books, losing herself in worlds of adventure and romance that existed beyond the confines of Mansfield Park. The pages whispered to her of possibilities, of lives lived boldly and passionately, so different from her own quiet existence. In her small attic room, a sanctuary gifted to her by Edmund's thoughtfulness, Fanny found solace. The crackling fire he had insisted upon warmed not just her body, but her heart. Here, surrounded by her few cherished possessions, she could be herself. She would sit by the window, watching the changing seasons, her mind a whirlwind of keen observations and deep reflections on the world around her. As the years continued their relentless march, Fanny's strong sense of right and wrong, coupled with her acute observations of those around her, began to shape her into a woman of substance. Like a diamond forming under pressure, her character was being refined, her worth increasing even as it went unrecognized by most of the household. Through it all, Fanny remained true to herself, a quiet force of integrity in a world that often valued appearance over substance. Her resolve was as steady as the ancient oaks that stood sentinel in the grounds of Mansfield Park, weathering storms both seen and unseen. As the sun set on another day at Mansfield Park, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns, a carriage could be heard approaching in the distance. The sound of hooves on gravel grew louder, and a flutter of excitement rippled through the household. Fanny, peering out of her attic window, saw two figures alight from the carriage, their faces obscured in the fading light. Little did she know that these newcomers would soon turn her carefully ordered world upside down, challenging everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and her place in the world. The arrival of Henry and Mary Crawford brought a whirlwind of excitement to Mansfield Park. The new neighbors, recently come to stay with their half-sister Mrs. Grant, were about to shake up the quiet lives of the Bertram family. A palpable buzz of anticipation filled the air as the Crawfords made their grand entrance at Mansfield. The once tranquil drawing room suddenly crackled with energy, like the calm before a storm. Henry Crawford swept in, his dark eyes twinkling with mischief, and his smile as warm as a summer breeze. He moved with an easy grace that left a trail of fluttering hearts and bated breath in his wake. His sister Mary followed, her presence as refreshing as a cool spring. Her melodious laughter rang out, filling the room with a lightness that had long been absent from the staid halls of Mansfield Park. The Bertram children were instantly ensnared by the Crawfords' charm. Maria and Julia, the two sisters, found themselves irresistibly drawn to Henry. Their eyes tracked his every movement, drinking in his presence like parched travelers at an oasis. Their laughter, a touch too loud and a bit too eager, punctuated his every quip. Maria, in particular, seemed to have forgotten her recent engagement to the wealthy but dreadfully dull Mr. Rushworth. Her fingers absently twisted her engagement ring, the diamond catching the light as she leaned in closer to Henry, hanging on his every word. Edmund Bertram, the younger son, destined for the clergy, found himself equally captivated by Mary Crawford. Her vivacious personality and worldly views challenged his more traditional outlook, igniting debates that left him both exhilarated and unsettled. As they strolled through the lush gardens of Mansfield, their animated conversations drifted on the warm summer breeze. The sound of their voices rising and falling in passionate discourse was a stark contrast to the usual hushed tones of the estate. Amidst this whirlwind of excitement stood Fanny Price, the quiet cousin of the Bertrams. Like a steadfast lighthouse in a turbulent sea, she observed the changing dynamics with growing unease. Her keen eyes, sharp and perceptive, caught every fleeting glance, every hidden meaning behind casual touches. She watched as Henry's attention bounced between Maria and Julia, creating a simmering rivalry that threatened to boil over at any moment. Fanny's heart constricted painfully as she watched Edmund, her dear friend and secret love, being slowly but surely swayed by Mary's worldly charm. It was as if Mary's words were a gentle current, gradually eroding Edmund's principles and pulling him away from the path he had always been so certain of. Fanny could almost see the invisible threads of Mary's influence wrapping around Edmund, tugging him further and further from the man she knew and loved. As days melted into weeks, the Crawfords' influence grew more pronounced. The once peaceful atmosphere of Mansfield Park now hummed with an undercurrent of excitement and tension. Laughter echoed more frequently through the halls, but so did whispered conversations and meaningful glances. The air itself seemed charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Fanny found herself increasingly isolated, her quiet warnings falling on deaf ears. She was like a lone voice crying out in the wilderness, drowned out by the siren song of the Crawfords. Her cousins, once her closest companions, now seemed to inhabit a different world, a world of flirtation, intrigue, and shifting loyalties. Fanny watched helplessly as the foundations of her home, once so solid and unchanging, began to crack and shift beneath her feet. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Fanny stood at her window, looking out over the grounds of Mansfield Park. The once familiar landscape now seemed altered, as if the very essence of her home had been changed. The manicured lawns and carefully tended gardens, once a source of comfort and stability, now seemed to hide secrets in their shadows. The gentle rustling of leaves in the evening breeze sounded like whispered conspiracies to her anxious ears. With a heavy heart, Fanny turned away from the window, her concerns about the Crawfords' influence on her cousins growing stronger by the day. As the only one seemingly immune to their charms, she found herself more isolated than ever, her warnings and concerns going unheeded by those around her. As night fell, an unsettling quiet descended upon Mansfield Park. The laughter and excitement of the day faded, leaving behind a sense of anticipation, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Fanny lay awake in her bed, her mind racing with worries about what the future might hold. Just as she was about to drift off to sleep, a sharp knock at her door jolted her awake. Her heart pounding, she rose to answer it, wondering what new upheaval awaited her in the darkness. Sir Thomas's departure from Mansfield Park left a gaping void in the household. The young residents, restless and eager for diversion, sought to fill this emptiness with their own amusements. The grand halls of Mansfield Park echoed with an unusual excitement, a buzzing energy that seemed to vibrate through the very walls. It was Tom Bertram who first suggested the idea of putting on a play, his eyes alight with mischief and anticipation. "Lovers' vows," he declared, his voice carrying through the drawing room. "It's perfect, don't you think? We'll transform this very room into our stage." The air in the room shifted, charged with a mix of enthusiasm and unease. Fanny, seated in her usual quiet corner, felt her heart quicken. She knew the content of the play, its themes far too mature and provocative for their circle. Her fingers twisted nervously in her lap as she watched the others react with growing excitement. "Oh, how thrilling!" Maria exclaimed, her cheeks flushing with pleasure. "I've always wanted to try my hand at acting." Julia, not to be outdone, chimed in. "Yes, it sounds wonderful. I'm sure we'll all find suitable roles." As the group began to discuss casting and preparations, Fanny's discomfort grew. The drawing room, once a place of quiet refuge, now felt stifling. The heavy curtains seemed to trap the heat of their excitement, making the air thick and oppressive. I'm not sure I can participate," Fanny ventured, her voice barely audible above the chatter. But her soft protest was quickly drowned out by the others' enthusiasm. "Nonsense, Fanny," Tom boomed, clapping her on the shoulder. "We need everyone for this to be a success. You must help us, even if you don't take a role on stage." Fanny felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on her, as tangible as the hand on her shoulder. She nodded reluctantly, unable to voice her true concerns. As the days passed, Mansfield Park transformed. The drawing room became a hive of activity, furniture pushed aside to make room for their makeshift stage. The usual quiet was replaced by the constant murmur of lines being rehearsed, punctuated by bursts of laughter or heated discussions over staging. Henry Crawford, with his easy charm and quick wit, quickly became the center of attention. Fanny watched with growing unease as he circled Maria, their chemistry on stage spilling over into their interactions off it. Their eyes would meet across the room, holding for a moment too long, their fingers brushing as they passed scripts back and forth. "Oh, Henry," Maria would sigh during rehearsals, her voice trembling with an emotion that seemed far too real. "How cruel fate is to keep us apart." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken desires. Fanny felt her stomach twist, aware of the dangerous game being played out before her eyes. Julia, initially enthusiastic, began to withdraw as she watched her sister capture Henry's attention. Her smiles became forced, her laughter brittle. One afternoon, unable to bear it any longer, she dramatically announced her withdrawal from the play. "I find I have no taste for acting after all," she declared, her voice quavering slightly. "Please carry on without me." The tension in the room was palpable as Julia swept out, leaving a wake of whispers and concerned glances. Edmund, caught between his moral reservations and his desire to be near Mary Crawford, struggled visibly with his decision. Fanny watched him pace the library, his brow furrowed in thought. "I should oppose this," he muttered, more to himself than to Fanny. "And yet, you're considering taking part?" Fanny asked, her voice laced with surprise and disappointment. Edmund turned to her, his expression conflicted. "I think I must. It's better than allowing a stranger into our midst, isn't it?" Fanny couldn't bring herself to agree, but neither could she voice her true thoughts. She watched as Edmund threw himself into his role, his eyes lighting up whenever Mary was near. As the days wore on, the line between fiction and reality blurred. Maria seemed to forget her engagement to Mr. Rushworth, losing herself in the passionate embraces of her stage lover. Henry encouraged her, his touches lingering, his whispers causing her to blush and giggle. Fanny observed it all, her heart heavy with the weight of unspoken warnings. She could see the true natures and motivations of those around her with startling clarity, and the potential consequences of this theatrical endeavor loomed large in her mind. The air in Mansfield Park grew heavier with each passing day, thick with unspoken tensions and simmering desires. It was as if the whole house was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable moment when the carefully constructed facade would crumble. As the final rehearsal drew to a close, a sudden commotion from outside broke through the theatrical bubble they had created. The sound of carriage wheels on gravel, voices raised in surprise and alarm, cut through the air like a knife. Fanny's heart leapt into her throat as she recognized the commanding tones that now echoed through the halls. The tranquility of Mansfield Park was shattered in an instant. Sir Thomas's unexpected return from Antigua had arrived like a thunderclap on a clear day. The tranquility of Mansfield Park was shattered in an instant. Sir Thomas's unexpected return from Antigua arrived like a thunderclap on a clear day. The once peaceful estate now buzzed with nervous energy, the air thick with the scent of panic and hastily hidden secrets. As Sir Thomas's carriage rumbled up the gravel drive, the sound echoed through the halls like a warning drum. The young inhabitants of the house scattered like startled birds, their hearts pounding in their chests. Trembling hands fumbled with props and costumes, shoving them into closets and under furniture. The drawing room, transformed into a makeshift stage, was dismantled with frantic urgency. Sir Thomas stepped into the house, his weathered face etched with lines of stern authority. The floorboards creaked under his heavy tread, each step sending ripples of tension through the household. His keen eyes, sharpened by years of managing plantations, missed nothing as they swept across the room. The state of affairs at Mansfield Park left him visibly shocked, his disappointment hanging in the air like a heavy fog. With measured steps and carefully chosen words, Sir Thomas began to reassert his authority. His voice, low and controlled, cut through the silence like a knife. "What has transpired in my absence?" he asked, each word falling like a weight upon the guilty consciences of those present. As order slowly returned to the household, Sir Thomas turned his attention to Edmund. The weight of his gaze fell heavily on his son's shoulders, disappointment radiating from every pore. Edmund, usually a pillar of propriety, felt the sting of shame burning his cheeks. He had allowed himself to be swept up in the theatrical fervor, a lapse in judgment that seemed particularly egregious given his future role as a clergyman. In the wake of Sir Thomas's return, the atmosphere at Mansfield Park shifted dramatically. The carefree laughter and excitement of recent weeks evaporated like morning dew under the harsh sun of reality. A somber mood settled over the house, as if a veil had been drawn over the sun, casting long shadows across once bright rooms. Amidst this upheaval, Maria Bertram found herself facing a harsh reality. The attentions of Henry Crawford, which had seemed so promising and thrilling, now revealed themselves as nothing more than a fleeting fancy. Like a butterfly flitting from flower to flower, Henry had been more enamored with the chase than with Maria herself. The realization hit her like a physical blow, leaving her breathless and hollow. With a heavy heart but a determined spirit, Maria proceeded with her marriage to Mr. Rushworth. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the bride's inner turmoil. The church bells rang out joyously, their peals echoing across the countryside. Flowers bloomed in abundance, their sweet fragrance filling the air. Guests sparkled in their finest attire, a sea of silks and jewels. Yet beneath the surface of this picture-perfect scene, there was a noticeable lack of genuine warmth or affection. As the newlyweds departed for their honeymoon, a subdued atmosphere settled over Mansfield Park. The house seemed to exhale, as if relieved to be free of the recent tumult. Julia Bertram, her own heart still smarting from Henry's preference for her sister, accompanied the couple on their wedding trip. Her departure was marked by a mixture of relief and lingering resentment, her emotions as tangled as the ribbons on her traveling bonnet. In the quiet that followed these momentous events, a subtle shift began to take place. Sir Thomas, his eyes now open to the true nature of those around him, began to notice Fanny's quiet virtue. Like a steady flame in a storm, Fanny had remained constant amidst the chaos, her behavior a stark contrast to the frivolity and imprudence that had reigned in his absence. As the days passed, Sir Thomas found himself observing Fanny with newfound appreciation. Her steadfast nature, once overlooked, now shone brightly in his eyes. This marked a turning point in Fanny's position within the household, as her uncle began to see her true worth, like a gem finally polished to reveal its hidden brilliance. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the grounds of Mansfield Park. As night fell, a sense of anticipation hung in the air. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new revelations. In the drawing room the family gathered, their voices a low murmur, but in the corner a solitary figure sat, head bent over her needlework. What thoughts swirled behind Fanny Price's quiet exterior? What role would she play in the drama yet to unfold? The drawing room at Mansfield Park hummed with life, a stark contrast to the quiet figure in the corner. Fanny Price sat with her head bent over her needlework, seemingly oblivious to the world around her. The warm glow of candlelight caught the auburn highlights in her hair, creating a halo effect that didn't escape Henry Crawford's notice. Henry's eyes lingered on Fanny, a smile playing on his lips as he contemplated his next move. The soft rustle of fabric and murmur of voices faded into the background as he focused on the challenge before him. What had begun as a game, a mere desire to make the overlooked Fanny fall in love with him, was slowly transforming into something more. As the weeks passed, Henry's pursuit of Fanny intensified. The Bertram family watched with a mixture of surprise and interest as he sought out every opportunity to be in her company. Their conversations, once stilted and formal, now flowed with an easy rhythm. Henry found himself captivated by Fanny's insights and the gentle strength that lay beneath her shy exterior. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke as Henry used his connections to assist Fanny's brother William in his naval career. The joy that lit up Fanny's face at this news was like sunshine breaking through clouds, and Henry felt a warmth spread through his chest at the sight. Her smile, so rare and precious, stirred something deep within him. As the leaves turned golden and fell from the trees, Henry's feelings for Fanny deepened. The thought of her consumed his waking hours and haunted his dreams. Her quiet grace and unwavering moral compass challenged him in ways he had never experienced before. Finally, on a chilly winter's morning, Henry could contain himself no longer. Frost crunched beneath his feet as he approached Fanny in the garden. His heart pounded like a drum, his breath visible in the cold air. The words tumbled out of him like a rushing river, his proposal of marriage hanging in the frosty air between them. Fanny stood frozen, her eyes wide with astonishment. The proposal she had never expected threw her into turmoil. Her mind raced, weighing the material advantages such a match would bring against the unease she felt in her heart. The garden around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her response. Despite the allure of financial security and social elevation, Fanny couldn't ignore the flaws she had observed in Henry's character. Moreover, her heart still harbored a secret love for Edmund, a love that refused to be silenced. With trembling hands and a voice barely above a whisper, Fanny refused Henry's proposal. The words seemed to echo in the still garden, heavy with consequence. The news of Fanny's rejection spread through Mansfield Park like wildfire. Sir Thomas, upon hearing of it, was thunderstruck. He paced the study, his face flushed with anger and disbelief. The floorboards creaked beneath his feet as he struggled to comprehend Fanny's decision. Summoning Fanny to his study, Sir Thomas's voice boomed with disappointment and frustration. "You foolish girl," he exclaimed, his words sharp as knives. "Do you not see the great opportunity you're casting aside?" Fanny stood before him, her posture straight despite her inner turmoil. She tried to explain her moral objections to Henry's character, but her words fell on deaf ears. Sir Thomas, blinded by his own ambitions for Fanny, could not fathom her reasoning. "Ingratitude," he thundered. "Obstinacy. Is this how you repay our kindness?" Each accusation struck Fanny like a physical blow, but she remained steadfast. Despite the immense pressure weighing upon her, she stood firm in her convictions. This moment marked a turning point in Fanny's relationship with her uncle and her position in the household. As night fell, an eerie silence descended upon Mansfield Park. Fanny retreated to her small room, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. The moonlight cast long shadows across the floor, mirroring the dark thoughts that plagued her. She knew that come morning, she would face the consequences of her decision. The grand halls of Mansfield Park echoed with a tense silence, broken only by the soft ticking of the ornate clock in the corner. Sir Thomas stood before the fireplace, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the polished floor. What punishment awaited Fanny, and how would this decision shape the future of Mansfield Park and its inhabitants? The grand halls of Mansfield Park echoed with a tense silence, broken only by the soft ticking of the ornate clock in the corner. Sir Thomas stood before the fireplace, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the polished floor. Fanny, her small frame dwarfed by the opulent surroundings, felt her heart racing as she awaited his verdict. "My dear," Sir Thomas began, his voice a mixture of authority and what he believed to be kindness, "I think it best for you to spend some time with your family in Portsmouth. It will give you a chance to reflect on your situation." Fanny's pale face remained impassive, but inside a storm raged. The thought of leaving Mansfield Park, her sanctuary for so many years, was like a physical pain. The familiar scent of leather-bound books and polished wood that had always brought her comfort now seemed to mock her impending departure. "Yes, Sir Thomas," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The words felt heavy on her tongue, each syllable a reluctant farewell to the life she had known. As news of Fanny's impending departure spread through the house, it was as if a vital cog in the machinery of Mansfield Park had suddenly been removed. The air grew thick with unspoken words and suppressed emotions. Servants whispered in corners, their hushed tones carrying a mix of sympathy and curiosity. Lady Bertram, in particular, was thrown into a state of distress. She had come to rely on Fanny's constant presence, like a ship anchored to a steady port in turbulent seas. Her plaintive voice echoed through the drawing room. "But who will read to me in the evenings? Who will arrange my shawls just so?" The weight of Lady Bertram's dependence settled on Fanny's shoulders like a heavy cloak. She felt the pull of duty warring with her desire for self-preservation, each tugging at her heart with equal force. Edmund, caught between loyalty to his father and his deep affection for Fanny, found himself in a state of inner turmoil. The library, once a haven of peace and intellectual discourse, now felt suffocating. He paced back and forth, the soft thud of his footsteps matching the erratic beating of his heart. When he finally found Fanny, his eyes searched her face, seeking answers to questions he dared not ask. "Fanny," he said, his voice low and urgent, "I understand why you refused Henry. Truly I do. But this journey, are you certain you'll be all right?" Fanny's heart leapt at his concern, even as it ached with the knowledge that his care was not the love she longed for. She could feel the warmth of his presence, so close yet impossibly far. "I'll manage, Edmund," she assured him, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. "I always do." As the day of departure drew near, Fanny found herself lost in a labyrinth of memories. Each room of Mansfield Park held a story, each corner a cherished moment. She ran her fingers along the spines of books in the library, their familiar titles a comfort in her time of uncertainty. In the garden, she breathed in the heady scent of roses, trying to commit their fragrance to memory. The contrast between the life she was leaving and the one she was returning to loomed large in her mind. Mansfield Park, with its polished floors and gleaming silverware, stood in stark opposition to the cramped, noisy home she remembered in Portsmouth. The thought of exchanging silk for coarse cotton, refined conversation for boisterous chatter, sent a shiver down her spine. Yet even as anxiety gnawed at her, Fanny's resolve remained unshaken. She would not compromise her principles, not even for the comfort and security Mansfield Park offered. Her integrity was a flame that burned bright, even in the face of an uncertain future. On the morning of her departure, a light mist clung to the grounds of Mansfield Park, as if the estate itself was reluctant to let her go. The damp air carried the earthy scent of wet grass and the faint aroma of breakfast being prepared in the kitchens. Fanny stood at her window, drinking in the familiar sights one last time. Sir Thomas, still clinging to the hope that this experience would change Fanny's mind about Henry Crawford, had arranged for her travel with meticulous care. His voice when he spoke to her was businesslike, but not unkind. "I've ensured you'll have some comforts for your stay in Portsmouth," he told her. "Remember, Fanny, the door to Mansfield Park will always be open to you." As the carriage pulled away, the crunch of gravel under its wheels sounding like a final farewell, Fanny allowed herself one last look at the grand house that had been her home. Through tear-blurred eyes, she watched as Mansfield Park faded into the distance, taking with it the only world she had truly known. The road ahead stretched out before her, as uncertain and intimidating as the future that awaited her in Portsmouth. With each turn of the wheels, Fanny felt herself being pulled further from the life she knew and closer to a past she had long since left behind. As the familiar landscape gave way to unknown territory, a chill of apprehension settled in her bones. What would await her in Portsmouth? How much had changed in her absence? And more importantly, how much had she changed? The carriage rattled on, carrying Fanny towards an uncertain future. As the last glimpse of Mansfield Park disappeared behind a bend in the road, she closed her eyes, steeling herself for what was to come. Little did she know that the true test of her character was only just beginning. Fanny's return to her family in Portsmouth was a harsh adjustment. The refinement of Mansfield Park seemed a distant memory as she stepped into her childhood home. The cramped, noisy household hit her like a tidal wave, leaving her momentarily breathless. Gone were the spacious rooms and hushed corridors she had grown accustomed to. Instead, a cacophony of shouts, cries, and shuffling feet assaulted her ears. The air hung thick with a potent cocktail of unwashed bodies, simmering stew, and damp laundry, making her nose wrinkle involuntarily. Her parents' embrace felt both familiar and foreign. Mrs. Price, once a hazy memory, now stood before Fanny as a living whirlwind of chaos. Her hair escaped its pins and wispy tendrils, her apron bore the battle scars of countless meals, and she darted from one crisis to another like a frantic sparrow. In her mother's harried movements, Fanny saw the stark opposite of Lady Bertram's languid elegance. The comparison made her heart ache with a bittersweet mixture of love and disappointment. A swarm of younger siblings descended upon Fanny, their curious eyes wide and hands sticky with God knows what. Their shrill voices and unrestrained behavior shocked her system, each outburst like a firecracker in the confines of the modest home. Fanny found herself instinctively straightening collars and gently correcting grammar, her refined habits now seeming almost comically out of place in this familiar yet altered landscape. Amidst the tumult, Fanny's gaze locked with Susan's. In her sister's eyes she recognized a kindred spirit, a hunger for knowledge, a desire for refinement that mirrored her own younger self. It was like finding a lifeboat in a storm-tossed sea, and Fanny clung to this connection with desperate relief. As days melted into weeks, Fanny carved out small oases of calm in the chaos. She took Susan under her wing, their quiet reading sessions and discussions a soothing balm to her frayed nerves. With each lesson, each shared smile, Fanny felt a growing sense of purpose unfurling within her. She was no longer just a visitor in her childhood home, but a beacon of change, however small and flickering that light might be. Yet even as she immersed herself in her family's boisterous life, Mansfield Park's shadow loomed large. Mary Crawford's letters arrived like clockwork, each one a bittersweet reminder of the world she had left behind. Fanny's hands would tremble as she broke the seal, her heart racing as she scanned the elegant script for news of Edmund. Mary's words painted vivid pictures of blossoming romance, of shared laughter and lingering glances between her and Edmund. Each sentence was a dagger to Fanny's heart, twisting deeper with every implied intimacy. She would fold these letters carefully, tucking away her pain along with the paper, presenting a calm facade to her family even as turmoil raged within her chest, like a caged bird beating its wings. The letters also brought news of Henry Crawford's persistent interest. Fanny's family, oblivious to the complexities of her heart, urged her to consider his proposal. Their well-meaning encouragement felt like pebbles in her shoes, a constant, irritating reminder of the choice that lay before her, grinding against her resolve with every step. As Portsmouth's damp air and crowded rooms took their toll, Fanny's health began to falter. Her cheeks grew pale as milk, her steps less sure. The physical discomfort mirrored her inner conflict, a battle between duty and desire, Between the comfort of the familiar and the allure of a grander life that seemed to slip further from her grasp with each passing day. In quiet moments, Fanny would close her eyes and imagine herself back at Mansfield Park. She could almost feel the soft grass beneath her feet, hear the rustle of leaves in the garden, smell the delicate perfume of roses wafting on a gentle breeze. The peace and order of that world called to her like a siren song. Yet when she opened her eyes to the chaos of her family home, to Susan's eager face, to her mother's harried but loving glance, she felt a fierce protectiveness, a determination to bring a touch of that refinement to those she loved. Weeks turned into months, and still Fanny remained resolute. Henry Crawford's proposal hung in the air like an unfinished sentence, tempting in its promise of security and status. But Fanny's heart, though battered by disappointment and strained by circumstance, held firm. She would not be swayed by convenience or expectation. As her health suffered and her spirit wavered, she clung to this decision, a small act of defiance against the whims of fate and society. One evening, as Fanny sat by the window, her latest letter from Mary Crawford clutched in her trembling hands, a commotion erupted outside. The street filled with the sound of galloping hooves and excited voices. A messenger, his horse lathered with sweat, pulled up sharply in front of their modest home. Fanny's heart leapt into her throat as she recognized the Bertram family crest on the rider's coat. What news could be so urgent as to warrant such a dramatic arrival? With shaking fingers, she reached for the proffered letter, a sense of foreboding settling over her like a heavy cloak. A shocking scandal had rocked the Bertram family to its core. News reached Fanny that Henry Crawford had run away with the now-married Maria Rushworth, throwing the entire household into turmoil and disgrace. The revelation crashed through the peaceful facade of Mansfield Park like a stone through glass. The once tranquil estate now buzzed with whispers and gasps, the air thick with disbelief and shame. Servants scurried through hallways, their eyes downcast, afraid to meet the gaze of their masters. The very walls seemed to shudder with the weight of the family's fall from grace. Maria, who had been staying with Mrs. Norris in London, had vanished from her husband's house without a trace. The city's gossip mills churned relentlessly, spewing out tales of her elopement with Henry Crawford. Each retelling grew more scandalous, more damning, until the Bertram and Rushworth names were dragged through the mud of society's judgment. But fate wasn't done with the Bertrams yet. As the family reeled from Maria's betrayal, another blow struck. Julia Bertram, perhaps intoxicated by the chaos or seizing a moment of reckless courage, followed in her sister's footsteps. In a whirlwind of passion and impulsivity, she eloped with Mr. Yates, a friend of Tom Bertram's, who had participated in the ill-fated play that now seemed a harbinger of doom. The once proud Mansfield Park now stood like a wounded animal, its dignity stripped away. Sir Thomas, the family patriarch, wandered the halls like a ghost. His face, usually set in stern lines of authority, now sagged with the weight of his daughter's actions. He paced restlessly, the thud of his footsteps echoing through the empty rooms, each step a reminder of his failure. "Where did I go wrong?" he muttered, his voice cracking with emotion. "How could they do this?" Lady Bertram, usually cocooned in a world of complacency, found herself rudely awakened. Her placid demeanor crumbled, giving way to fits of hysteria. She clutched at her husband's sleeve, her eyes wide and wild. "Thomas, what will become of us?" she wailed, her voice rising to a fever pitch. "Our girls, our poor, foolish girls." The ripples of this familial earthquake reached even Tom Bertram, already bedridden from his own excesses. The news of his sister's disgrace hit him like a physical blow. He lay in his darkened room, pale and drawn, his labored breathing a testament to the sickness that had infected not just his body, but the very heart of the Bertram family. As the true nature of the Crawford siblings finally came to light, it was as if a veil had been lifted from everyone's eyes. Their charming facade crumbled away, revealing the selfish, manipulative core beneath. Their actions had not only destroyed their own reputations, but had dragged down those who had foolishly trusted them. Miles away in Portsmouth, Fanny received the news with a maelstrom of emotions. Shock coursed through her veins at the audacity of the act. quickly followed by a bittersweet sense of vindication. She had always sensed something amiss with the Crawfords, and now her instincts had been proven right in the most devastating way possible. Yet, even as a part of her felt justified, another part ached for the family she had come to love. The Bertrams, for all their faults, had been her home and her world for so long. To see them brought so low filled her with a deep, aching sorrow. As she sat by the window in her modest Portsmouth home, Fanny's mind whirled with concern. The salty sea breeze carried the scent of change, of upheaval. She closed her eyes, picturing Mansfield Park in ruins, its inhabitants lost and broken. Her heart raced, torn between the urge to rush to their aid and the fear of what she might find. Just then, a letter arrived, its seal bearing the Bertram crest. Fanny's hands trembled as she reached for it, her breath catching in her throat. As she broke the seal, her eyes fell upon the first line, written in a shaky, desperate hand. "Fanny, we need you. Edmund is." Her heart stopped. What had become of Edmund? The letter slipped from her fingers, leaving her suspended in a moment of terrifying uncertainty. Edmund's world lay in ruins, shattered by the scandal involving Maria and Henry Crawford. The foundations of everything he believed in had crumbled, leaving him adrift in a sea of despair and confusion. The once pristine halls of Mansfield Park now seemed to echo with whispers of shame and disappointment. Edmund found himself wandering these corridors like a ghost, his footsteps heavy with the weight of recent events. In his desperation for solace, he turned to the one person he knew would understand: Fanny. With trembling hands, Edmund sat at his writing desk, the blank paper before him a stark contrast to the tumult of his thoughts. The scratching of his pen filled the oppressive silence of his room as he poured his heart out to Fanny in Portsmouth. Ink splattered across the page, mirroring the chaos in his mind. "My dearest Fanny," he began, the words flowing like a torrent. "I find myself in the darkest of places, and your steady light is the only beacon I can see." As Edmund recounted Mary Crawford's reaction to the scandal, his pen moved with renewed vigor. The memory of their conversation burned in his mind, each word etched like acid on his heart. "Can you believe it, Fanny?" he wrote, his usually neat handwriting becoming more frantic. "Mary suggested that if Henry and Maria marry quickly, the scandal might simply blow over, as if a hasty marriage could erase such a transgression." The quill nearly tore through the paper as Edmund described Mary's most shocking suggestion, that he, as a clergyman, could help smooth things over. The very thought made his stomach churn, a bitter taste rising in his throat. Days blended into nights as Edmund penned letter after letter to Fanny. With each word, he felt the scales falling from his eyes. Mary Crawford, once the object of his deepest affections, now stood revealed in the harsh light of reality. Her charm and wit, once so captivating, now seemed a flimsy facade hiding a lack of moral depth. As spring unfurled outside his window, painting the world in vibrant hues, Edmund's inner world remained shrouded in gray. The contrast was stark, nature's renewal mocking his personal winter. Yet amidst this gloom, Fanny's replies arrived like the first warm breeze of the season, her words filled with understanding and gentle support, wrapped around him like a comforting embrace. In the depths of his grief and disappointment, Fanny's steadfast presence was like a sturdy oak, offering shelter from the storm. "You were right all along, dear Fanny," he confessed in one letter, the admission feeling like a weight lifted from his chest. "How I wish I had heeded your counsel." With each exchange, Edmund found himself seeing Fanny in a new light. The girl he had always viewed as a sister was transforming before his eyes into something more. Her quiet strength and deep empathy stirred something in him, a feeling he couldn't quite name, but found himself drawn to nonetheless. As the days passed, Edmund made the painful decision to end things with Mary. It felt like cutting away a part of himself, but he knew it was necessary. Like a tree shedding its leaves in autumn, he had to let go of what was dead to make room for new growth. Throughout this tumultuous time, Fanny's letters were a balm to Edmund's wounded spirit. Her words, filled with understanding and gentle support, wrapped around him like a warm embrace. In the depths of his grief and disappointment, Fanny's steadfast presence was like a sturdy oak, offering shelter from the storm. As Edmund processed his grief and disappointment, He found solace in his correspondence with Fanny. Her steady support and understanding provided him with comfort during this difficult time, setting the stage for a reevaluation of his feelings and priorities. Just as Edmund was beginning to find his footing again, a letter arrived from Sir Thomas. The familiar handwriting on the envelope sent a jolt of apprehension through him. What new development could this bring? With trembling fingers, he broke the seal, unaware that the contents of this letter would set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. Sir Thomas had come to recognize his mistakes in raising his children. With this realization, he acknowledged Fanny's true worth and sent a heartfelt request for her to return to Mansfield Park. The hope that her presence might mend the fractured household hung in the air like a fragile thread, ready to snap at the slightest tension. As Fanny's carriage rolled up the familiar driveway, her heart raced with a mix of anticipation and dread. The grand facade of Mansfield Park loomed before her, its windows dark and uninviting, a stark contrast to the warmth she once knew. The air felt heavy, as if the very walls of the house held their breath, waiting for her arrival. The crunch of gravel under the carriage wheels seemed to echo the unease in Fanny's chest. She stepped out, her shoes meeting the ground with a soft thud that seemed to reverberate through the eerie stillness of the estate. The scent of rain-soaked earth and wilting roses filled her nostrils, a bittersweet reminder of happier times. Stepping into the entrance hall, Fanny was immediately struck by the palpable tension that permeated the air. The once bustling household now moved in slow motion, each inhabitant a ghost of their former self. Lady Bertram paced the drawing room like a caged bird, her fingers twisting nervously in the folds of her dress. The rustle of fabric was the only sound breaking the oppressive silence. Sir Thomas, the pillar of strength Fanny had always known, now stood with slumped shoulders. The weight of his perceived failures etched deeply into the lines of his face, aging him beyond his years. His eyes, once sharp and commanding, now held a haunted look that made Fanny's heart ache. The news of Tom's illness hit Fanny like a physical blow. The once vivacious young man now lay pale and weak, his reckless lifestyle having exacted a cruel toll. Without hesitation, Fanny took charge of his care, her gentle hands and soothing voice a balm to his fevered brow. Day and night she sat by his bedside, the soft glow of candlelight casting long shadows across the room. As the days passed, Fanny's quiet strength began to work its magic on the household. Like a gentle stream slowly eroding a rocky shore, her calm presence smoothed the jagged edges of their collective grief and shame. Lady Bertram found solace in Fanny's patient ear, while Sir Thomas marveled at the young woman's wisdom and grace under pressure. The arrival of Susan, Fanny's sister, brought a fresh energy to Mansfield Park. Her wide-eyed wonder at the grandeur of the estate served as a reminder of the beauty that still existed within its walls. The sound of Susan's laughter, though tentative at first, began to fill the empty corridors, breathing life back into the somber household. Amidst the slow healing of the family, it was Edmund who found himself most profoundly affected by Fanny's return. As they walked through the gardens, the sweet scent of roses mingling with the earthy aroma of freshly cut grass, Edmund began to see Fanny in a new light. Her quiet strength, her unwavering moral compass, and her deep capacity for love shone like a beacon, illuminating the shadows cast by recent events. In moments of quiet reflection, Edmund found himself comparing Fanny to Mary Crawford, the woman who had once captivated his heart. Where Mary had been a dazzling firework, bright but fleeting, Fanny was the North Star, constant, reliable, and true. The realization dawned on him slowly, like the first rays of sunlight creeping over the horizon, that his feelings for Fanny ran deeper than he had ever imagined. As calm slowly returned to Mansfield Park, the family began to appreciate Fanny's true value, recognizing her as the moral center that they had previously overlooked. In her quiet strength and unwavering love, they found the foundation upon which to rebuild their shattered world. Just as it seemed that peace was finally settling over Mansfield Park, a letter arrived. The seal bore an unfamiliar crest, and as Sir Thomas broke it open with trembling hands, the color drained from his face. He looked up, his eyes meeting Fanny's across the room, filled with a mixture of fear and disbelief. What new challenge was about to test the fragile harmony they had worked so hard to restore? Peace descended upon Mansfield Park, enveloping the estate in a gentle embrace. The tranquility that settled over the grounds was a stark contrast to the tumultuous events of recent days. In this newfound calm, Edmund found himself wandering the familiar paths, his footsteps crunching softly on the gravel. The air was sweet with the scent of blooming flowers, and a warm breeze rustled through the leaves, carrying with it a whisper of change. As he walked, Edmund's mind was awash with thoughts of Fanny, her kind eyes, her gentle smile, her unwavering support. All these qualities that he had long taken for granted now shone with new significance. His heart raced as he realized the depth of his feelings for her. It was as if a veil had been lifted from his eyes, revealing a love that had been patiently waiting to be discovered. Driven by a nervous energy, Edmund sought out Fanny. He found her in the garden, her delicate hands tending to a bed of roses. The sun caught in her hair, creating a halo effect that took his breath away. For a moment he stood frozen, drinking in the sight of her. "Fanny," he called softly, his voice trembling slightly. She turned, her eyes widening as she saw the intensity in his gaze. Edmund crossed the distance between them in a few quick strides. Words tumbled from his lips, a heartfelt confession of love, and a proposal intertwined. His hands shook as he took hers, awaiting her response with bated breath. Fanny's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Years of silent longing culminated in this moment as she whispered a trembling, "Yes." Their embrace was tender, a promise of the life they would build together. The roses around them seemed to bloom brighter, as if nature itself was celebrating their union. News of their engagement spread through Mansfield Park like wildfire, bringing smiles to faces that had long been creased with worry. Sir Thomas and Lady Bertram found particular solace in this union. They saw it as a beacon of hope, a source of true happiness and moral strength that would guide their family's future. As the days passed, Edmund and Fanny settled into the parsonage near Mansfield Park. Their home became a haven of warmth and laughter, a stark contrast to the recent turmoil. The sound of their shared joy echoed through the rooms, filling the space with a sense of contentment that had long been absent. However, not all endings were as joyous. Maria's ill-fated marriage to Mr. Rushworth crumbled under the weight of scandal, ending in a bitter divorce. Shunned by society and her family, she found herself exiled to live with Mrs. Norris. The two women, bound by their shared disgrace, retreated from the world they once reveled in, their days now filled with bitter regrets and sharp-tongued recriminations. Julia's hasty marriage to Mr. Yates, while initially frowned upon, gradually found acceptance. Sir Thomas, softened by recent events, allowed the couple to reconcile with the family. Their return brought a sense of completeness to the household, another step towards healing. The sound of Julia's laughter, once again ringing through the halls of Mansfield Park, was a balm to the family's wounded spirit. Tom Bertram, haunted by his brush with death, underwent a profound transformation. The reckless young man was replaced by a sober, responsible heir. He took on his duties at Mansfield Park with newfound seriousness, his changed demeanor a constant reminder of how close they had come to losing him. The weight of responsibility sat heavily on his shoulders, but he bore it with a newfound grace. In the midst of these changes, Susan Price blossomed under Fanny's gentle guidance. She seamlessly stepped into life at Mansfield Park, becoming a ray of sunshine in Lady Bertram's often dreary days. Her youthful energy and kind heart brought a fresh vitality to the grand old house. The sound of her quick footsteps and cheerful voice became a welcome addition to the daily rhythm of Mansfield Park. As the dust settled, Sir Thomas found himself in moments of quiet reflection. He acknowledged the errors in his parenting, recognizing how his rigid expectations had nearly led his children astray. In Fanny's quiet strength and moral integrity, he saw the values he should have instilled all along. The realization was bittersweet, tinged with regret for past mistakes but hopeful for the future. The halls of Mansfield Park, once echoing with discord, now resonated with harmony. Fanny and Edmund's marriage stood as a testament to the power of true affection and virtue. Their love, like a sturdy oak, had weathered the storm and now stood tall, its roots deep in the rich soil of mutual respect and understanding. As the sun set on this chapter of their lives, Mansfield Park stood renewed. The superficial charms and worldly values that had once threatened to tear it apart now seemed trivial in the face of genuine love and integrity. In the warm glow of the evening light, the house seemed to stand a little taller, its windows gleaming with the promise of a brighter future. The gentle breeze that had ushered in this new era of peace continued to whisper through the trees, carrying with it the hope of many happy years to come. And as night fell, the stars twinkled above Mansfield Park, silent witnesses to the enduring power of love, forgiveness, and the strength of family bonds renewed.
This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.